Especially when you're new to being the Dungeon Master, there can be a lot to keep track of, and no one does everything perfectly. However, I think there are lots of good Dungeon Masters that don't do the 5 things I'll be covering in this video, and I think their games could be better if they did. Hi everyone, my name is Nate, and you are watching WASD20, a channel about tabletop RPGs and fantasy maps. This video is sponsored by Hero Forge. If you're looking for miniatures for your new party of adventurers, I honestly believe there is no better way than Hero Forge, because their online tool lets you custom build each character exactly as each player envisions them. Hero Forge has been around for years now, and they have been continuously adding options for various races, clothing, weapons, and other items. And you can customize their pose, facial expressions, and more. Check it out right now over at heroforge.com, and you can order your miniature shipped straight to your house, or you can 3D print it at home by purchasing the STL file like I did for this half-orc monk I'm going to be playing in an upcoming game. Thanks Hero Forge for helping make this video possible. So the 5 things Dungeon Masters forget that I'll be covering in this video are by no means gathered through rigorous scientific research on the subject. There was no representative sample or anything involved here. They're just things that I tend to forget and things I've spoken with fellow DMs about when we're commiserating about our own or our players' bad habits. Still, these are my top 5 things DMs forget, and if you happen to remember all these things constantly at the table, you're probably a better DM than I am. And, you know, that's not really all that hard to imagine. All right, here we go. First, forgetting to take good notes. I have a feeling a lot of you can relate to this one. In many sessions I've run, I'll sit down to prep for the game, and because of the craziness of schedules, sometimes it's been weeks or months, and I can't remember what happened last time. How can I prep for this session when I can't remember what happened in the last? I can go to my prep notes. Oh, they have like 3 lines describing a couple scenes, maybe an NPC name. It helps, but there were likely some things that happened during that session that aren't in these sparse notes. Our cleric revealed that she has a long-lost brother in this town. The planned quest giver sorta got shoved off a cliff. I had to quickly make up a name and backstory for the bartender on the spot. And I also had to improv a quick general store called the Heavy Horn Provisioners, where the player characters nearly got in a fist fight after insulting a fellow customer. These are all things that I as the DM should have written down. I may be planning to play again in 2 weeks, and I think I'll remember, but when that game session gets postponed, as unfortunately often does happen, my memory fails. I've forgotten to take notes a lot in my life as a DM, but I am getting better. Rather than riding that post-session high by playing a video game, or perhaps just collapsing in bed exhausted from my last-minute prep and all the quick thinking I had to do, I have found it incredibly helpful to take notes right after playing. I sit behind my DM screen and I type up a session summary. Ideally, I'm also taking some notes during the game. That bartender's name, for example, I should probably write that down right away if possible. Or as I showed in my NPC video, which I'll put a link to right up there, if you have a nice list of pre-generated names ready to go, you can just pick a name and write bartender from session 12 by it. Really handy. You see, if I wait another 2 hours, that name might already be gone. But for most things, taking some notes right after the game or even the next morning as I'm cleaning up my books and miniatures is usually good enough. And if you do this, it will save you so much time and energy trying to remember when you're prepping for the next session. Now, quick tip, you might also have a player who takes really good notes. Don't be afraid to ask them for those notes. Just say, hey, can you forward me those? Or, if they have them written down on a piece of paper, just snap a quick photo on your phone with their permission. Not a bad way to go. The second thing we DMs can sometimes forget is to take a break. Sometimes I, as a DM, get really caught up in the fun of the game. I've been thinking about the game for the last few days or weeks, done some research, prepped encounters, and when it's finally game time, it's on. Let's play. Events are transpiring, the players are reacting and taking things in unforeseen directions, and it's easy to get lost in the joy of gaming. Now, if there's some good momentum, certainly it's not a bad idea to keep that going. But pay careful attention to your player's body language and other signs that a break might be needed. A quick 5 or 10 minute break can stave off fatigue from a long day at work or school. It can re-energize your group, give people a chance to chat and catch up on real life for a few minutes, marvel at that paint job on your miniatures, ask what you think of the latest module, etc. Now, every group is different, but I think for most groups, taking the mid-game break or two is a really good thing to remember. And if you struggle to remember it, you might even want to set yourself a little alarm on your phone or something. The third thing DMs forget: involving those quiet players. As a DM, it's kind of natural to focus on the players that are most active, involved, or that just talk the most. And honestly, when players are giving you something, interacting with the game world, weaving in their backstory, it's just natural that they're going to get more attention from the DM. So while I happen to think it's fine for this to happen to some extent, it's just natural, like some people are just quieter by nature, if left totally unchecked, I think it can get unhealthy. In my opinion, it takes just a little bit of intentionality at the table to keep those quieter players from sinking into the woodwork completely. It might be hard to believe for the amount you all see me talking each week, but I actually tend to be a bit of an introvert, and depending on the group, I can be a bit on the quieter side at the table. Again, it definitely depends on the group, and probably a bit on the character I'm playing too. So while I think you have to be careful about putting certain players on the spot too much, or strictly trying to make everyone role play exactly equally, I do appreciate it when the DM notices me being quiet and asks what my character is doing during all of this, or when an NPC picks me out of the party as the one to address a question to when maybe the other players have been a bit more talkative in that session. It's just that little bit of intentionality that keeps me involved, thinking about my character, and keeps me from just being a spectator. I think it does take time to learn about your players to know what they feel comfortable with. You don't want to be too pushy or make them overly uncomfortable. A little bit of discomfort can stretch us in a healthy way, but too much can embarrass us or make us withdraw further. So look for small ways to get your quieter group members involved. And this is actually one for the players to keep in mind too. Try to be aware if you're the one who talks way more than the others. Players can do their part by helping the DM draw those quieter players into the game by intentionally talking less at times to leave space for those quieter players to speak up. The fourth thing DMs forget: asking for feedback from players. This doesn't need to be an every session thing. Sometimes you get a really good feel for what players are thinking by reading their body language, facial expressions. Just try to take note of what your players seem to be having most fun with. However, there can be a lot that goes unnoticed, so it's good to actually ask once in a while. For example, you can ask, what did you think of that chase sequence, if you want to be very specific? Was that fun? Did it work well? Or more broadly, you can ask questions like, what are you enjoying most about this game? What parts of it are you not liking as much? Now, for me, it can be hard to hear anything my players don't like. I've asked before, and I've had some stuff hit me pretty hard, like, oh crap, you're right. I do that a lot. I suck. But while it's hard to hear those things, getting constructive criticism is an important part of becoming better at anything. I think this is most important when you're newer to DMing or when you have a new group you're playing with and you're still trying to figure out if your expectations are the same. On the other hand, sometimes it works best when you have a group of people that you have a good relationship with. There should be some level of mutual respect, and when you trust and value their opinion, it's a lot easier to ask that question. I'm aware that that's not always the case in game groups. Relationships can get a little bit messy, but especially if you have thick skin, ask away. Getting clear feedback from players is something that I think a lot of DMs don't do and should. Now, all of the 4 elements I and many other DMs I know struggle to remember are related to a DM getting too focused on what they are doing with the game and really involve kind of taking a step back. It's like we as DMs can sometimes get tunnel vision and need to slow down and look around. And the 5th one here is probably the epitome of DM tunnel vision: forgetting to consider the player characters. And I'm glad to say I don't know if this is a really common thing that DMs forget, but I've certainly been guilty of forgetting it quite a bit. We DMs may plan amazing sessions full of awesome encounters, clever puzzles, and cool lore, and all of that's great. But when we forget to consider the player characters' backgrounds, interests, and abilities, we're missing out on something that can really take our games to the next level. There are several ways to do this. Weaving your character backstories into the story of your campaign is one of the main ways. This can be a bit hard to do once your campaign is going, and that's why I think a session 0, where you figure some of this stuff out together before you play, is really valuable. Once the campaign is going, look for ways to tap into the interests and most firmly held beliefs of the PCs. A character who's a bibliophile getting the chance to visit your world's greatest library, for example. Or the rogue actually having a cool encounter that rewards stealth rather than brute force. This can actually apply to loot, too. The fact that in The Hobbit, Bilbo finds a sword that glows when goblins are around would be much less interesting if Tolkien hadn't put any goblins or orcs in the rest of the story. So consider your characters, their backstories, their abilities, and yes, even their loot. Work cool things into your game that will make their character choices feel meaningful. If you're running a module, this can require a bit of flexibility and tweaking. I find that especially true with loot, by the way. If I'm running a one-on-one session for my friend who's playing a rogue, I might change that magical axe to some magic arrows or something my player character can actually use. All right, those are my top 5 things DMs forget, but I do have one honorable mention. Rules. Hey, we're human. Most of us can't remember every rule in the book. There's a lot that I forget, but to me this one really isn't that big of a deal. You can look stuff up, you can rely on your players. Still, I do think it would be fun to do a separate video at some point on the rules I've screwed up. There's a lot of them. But hey, what are the things that you are most likely to forget as DM? I'd love to hear what you think down in the comments below. I also want to thank the WASD20 patrons for their support. Look at the names of these incredible supporters of mine. I love them. Patrons obviously get the warm, fuzzy feeling that they're making a difference for me, but they also get some pretty cool rewards, such as weekly live streams with me and some other cool stuff. So if you're thinking that you might want to join with these amazing patrons, go check it out right now over at patreon.com/WASD20. All right, that's going to do it for this one, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. You'll see me again very soon.